Q&A. Good afternoon. Welcome, everybody, to the session Data for R&I Policy Initiative. We have today three speakers: Cecilia Cabello Valdo, who is working for FECIT, the Spanish for FECIT, Thomas Schengel, who is working for the Austrian Institute of Technology, and Michael Keenan, who is working for the OECD. I am sorry, I'm replacing the moderator until an IT issue is being fixed. You have now a poll that is running. Please answer your questions and we will know what's your opinion on it. Check out the polls and so I will start now with our first speaker, Thomas.
I think I'm the last, but if you want...
sorry, Michael, I'm sorry. Why can we not delay any longer the... I'm sorry. So the digitalization of the R&I policy is opening up new opportunities to boost better evidence-based policymaking, improving our ability to acquire large and detailed data sets. The European Commission and several countries are already designing information systems that collect R&I related microdata and are used to inform policies. By deepening the collaboration between national European R&I data, we can collectively design, implement, and evaluate better R&I policies. This session will focus on existing activities and discuss how to overcome bottlenecks, suggested ways to move forward. And so our first speaker, Thomas from the OECD, who is a senior policy analyst in the Directorate for Science, Technology and Industry, and has worked on innovation policy for many decades, will now explain us why we can no longer delay the digitalization of R&I policy, and why do we need closer cooperation on data for R&I policy. Please, Mike, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Aria, for that introduction. So yeah, I've been in the area for a couple of decades now, and before I was at the University of Manchester, but now I'm at the OECD for the last 13 years. So you asked some questions like, why can't we delay?
Katrina, I am dying. Can someone sort this?
Maybe you can mute your mic, Aria. So there are some questions that I was asked to talk to. The first one was, why can't we delay any longer the digitalization of R&I policy? And the second question was about why do we need closer cooperation on data for R&I policy, particularly in international cooperation. But before I answer those questions, I just want to say a few words about what we're doing at the OECD and why, in fact, we at the OECD have been asked to contribute to this session. I mean, at the OECD, of course, we're interested in this, in these questions. These come natural to us, but we also have particular lines of work that relate to this. And I'll just mention three of those. The first is the project which we started in 2017, where we looked across some 60 to 70 of these digital science and innovation policy projects in Europe and beyond. And we analyzed why they were being set up, how they were being set up, who was involved, how they were being used. And we produced a lot of interesting material there. We did a case study also of the Norwegian system, and all of that work has currently been written up. And there's some very useful lessons there that we can that we're able to draw. In addition, we been doing some work, statistical work, where we've also been looking at trying to collect this sort of data from different funding agencies. There's a project called FundStat. So Cecilia, in a moment, will talk a little bit about some of the work she's been doing in Spain along similar lines. But this is us actually in the OECD doing this ourselves, not only studying what other countries are doing, but also collecting this type of data to see how it can be used in analysis, how it can be shared, how there can be international aspects brought to bear on this data as well. And finally, we also have this STIP Compass, which is a qualitative database which we manage together with the European Commission, where we collect policy data. So this is not data about individual projects, but it's about policies. And we have information about 6,000 policies across the European Union and beyond as well. We use quite advanced semantic technologies and taxonomies in order to be able to link different types of data together and also to show it in various types of interactive dashboards. So that's the kind of background as to why I'm speaking today. But now let me turn to the actual questions. So why can't we delay any longer the digitalization of R&I policy? I think I'll highlight 3 reasons here. The first one is the questions that are being asked by policymakers. So policymakers now are asking questions like, how much research funding does my country give to AI, or to this to SDG number 5, or to COVID-19 for that matter? And the problem is we're not able to answer those sorts of questions with additional types of indicators. So we're having to get down to the microdata level, but to do that, we also need to do machine learning, topic modeling, and all those sorts of things, which Cecilia will talk about in a moment in a Spanish context. So these are important questions that we're not able to answer normally, and we need to move into this into these new infrastructures in order to be able to begin to answer those questions. Secondly, there's competition for resources from other sectors. Other sectors are rapidly digitalizing. I would say we're even a little bit behind the curve in the STI policy field and the R&I policy field, and that puts us at a disadvantage because those other sectors, they're able to extract better intelligence to inform their policy making, but importantly, they're also able to go to the Ministry of Finance and say, this is the impact of our policies, and that's difficult for us to do while we're unable to answer some of those questions that I talked about a moment ago. It doesn't mean that these technologies are going to be the silver bullets, because they're not, but even still, they're going to help us some way to begin to answer some of those questions. Thirdly, are the targets of R&I policy interventions, the researchers, the entrepreneurs, the universities, the PRIs. These are increasingly tech and digital savvy users. So they expect the R&I policy system, the ministries, the funding agencies, to also have these sorts of technologies in place, whereby they need to put in a funding grant, or they want to put information into a repository. They expect all this to be done digitally. They expect it to be seamless. They also expect government increasingly to be able to provide intelligence tools that they can use themselves, so that they can also design and think about and plan their own activities. So those are 3 reasons why I think we can no longer delay the digitalization of R&I policy. Then on to the second question: what do we need? Why do we need closer cooperation on data for R&I policy? And again, I'll highlight just 3 reasons here. First of all, the data sources. The data sources are very diverse. We're talking about administrative data, publication data, data in other types of databases, lots of different places. Some of the data is transnational, many of it's locked away in silos. So we need cooperation in order to be able to unlock that data. And how might we do that? Well, this is my second point. International standards are one way. So there's a lot of work going on there, but still there are some big barriers there, which I can come back to a little bit later on, because I'm watching the clock now. I need to speed up a wee bit. And thirdly, we also need to have international learning. So there's a lot going on across countries. But it seems to us that a lot of people are reinventing the wheel, if you like. So there's scope here for a lot of cooperation to see what each of us is doing. In that regard, in the OECD, we're currently looking to set up a group of leading analysts and data experts to facilitate this sort of knowledge exchange. They will look at the application of standards, data exchange promotion, and development of multilateral mechanisms, and also provide an oversight to the sorts of projects that we're doing in this area within the OECD. I'm going to add a final question here, which wasn't in my list, is what more needs to be done? And again, I'll highlight 3 actions here. The first one is that we need to nurture the skills and organizational capabilities to both maintain these digital infrastructures, but also to use them. So it's important for us to be able to train and empower those officials who are in charge of validating the data, for example. But also at the same time, users need to be comfortable with using the data. They need to know how to use the data. And I know from looking at the various initiatives across the world that we've looked at in the DCIP project that we've been conducting over the last few years, a lot of these infrastructures were not being used very extensively because they were not well understood, and people didn't know how to use them and how to make sense of the data. Second point is that we need to promote cooperation within countries. So here I'll be talking about a lot about international cooperation, but even within countries, we see that missing. So virtually every funding agency now is going digital in some way or another. Often they have open APIs on there, using open standards, but still there's a lot of silos there. There's a lack of linkages between those different systems. So there is this fragmentation at the national level. So if we have that at the national level, then how can we expect to have a more integrated picture at the international levels? This is another point. And the third other issue I'd like to raise, and what more needs to be done, is around managing the public-private partnership relationships. So here, if we look at some of these initiatives, the private sector are playing quite big roles. If you look even outside of the initiatives, you've got the big academic publishers who are very active in this area, who are transforming themselves into digital data companies. There are many advantages with working with these companies, of course. They provide off-the-shelf solutions that are well developed. They often have international interoperability standards that can be used, and they can also easily plug capability gaps that may exist in the public sector. However, there are also some risks that we still need to bear in mind as well. To begin with, for example, there's the risk of the loss of control over the future direction of the developments. There may be discriminatory access to data, and there can also be secrecy around the methods and algorithms that are being used. So these are also some of the risks that need to be borne in mind. So I'm sorry that was a bit of a rush shopping list, if you like, of some of the issues that I think that we do face, but also the opportunities and in fact the need for us to move into this space in a much more aggressive way. And I very much welcome the European Commission organising this event today, and also their R&I data hub as well. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael, and good afternoon to everybody. I hope now you can hear me. Digitalization is good, but sometimes it can be problematic. That was my case. That's why I was not able to join this session from the very beginning. Nevertheless, it gives us the opportunity to be open to many participants. I see now that we have around 100 participants following this session on data, what we can do more with RNI data, how we can share more RNI data with other public administrations in the European Commission. I would like to thank Michael for his intervention, and I would like to inform you that on the first poll question that we had, what is your opinion, how important do you believe it is for the European governments to be able to share and use RNI microdata? 57%. They said that it is very important. So it's very good, this first reaction that we had from the public that is participating to this session. I would like to ask, before I move to the next question, whether Cecilia or Thomas would have any reactions or anything to add to the replies of Michael. Yes, Thomas, I see, and then Cecilia, maybe. Yes.
Yes, actually, a very brief reflection. Of course, I fully agree with what Michael said. I just want to add one point about the collaboration topic, because you speak about these silos and these different activities distributed across Europe, and we need to harmonize them in order to advance our facilities that we have for R&I policy indicators and R&I policy data. I would like to bring in the notion of infrastructure in that context. So we need to make efforts to put these different activities in research infrastructures where we can better harmonize these different and fragmented views. I will say a few words later about one infrastructure we are actively participating in, the RESIS infrastructure. And I think this could be platforms or vehicles where we can really make this collaboration among these different silos, both within the countries and across countries, more fruitful.
Thank you, Thomas. Thank you, Thomas. Indeed, the role of research infrastructures would be very important. Cecilia, something to add from your side?
Yeah, to add, actually it follows very well for what Thomas had said and Michael said. I agree with both of what their interventions. I just want to add the human dimension, the people, because to ask the policy questions, you need the experts and you need the policymakers to be. It's not just about the data and it's not just about the infrastructures. You need the policymakers because they're the ones asking the questions, and you need to work with them, and you need the experts to understand the information. So we can't. Part of the lessons learned is incorporating the human dimension, or the participants and the experts and the policymakers. I think this is really, really important. And we can't just talk, we're not just talking about the infrastructures, and we're not just talking about the data. We can't forget the people behind everything. So I wanted to add that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Indeed, the data are data, but how we can use the data for policymaking, it is extremely important. And that's actually the purpose of the whole exercise that we have launched with my colleagues in the European Commission. So I suggest that I don't know now whether in the polls we are turning to the next question. And I think that's indeed the case. I don't know whether we have already the results. But the next question is, in your opinion, what are the main obstacles that may hinder the ability of European governments to share their research and innovation microdata? So the poll is open for everybody to reply to this question. In the meantime, until the moment we have your replies, I would suggest that we move to Cecilia. Cecilia, do it later. So Cecilia, my question to you is that in the Science Foundation for Science and Technology in Spain, you have started already the digitalization of research and innovation policy with important initiatives. Could you tell us more about your experience? And in particular, if you could highlight any immediate effect on your policy making. So you have 7 minutes to reply to this question.
And thank you, Anna. It's a pleasure to participate and share with our experience. Yes, we've developed a tool called the Corpus Viewer, which applied to research and innovation policy has been a joint initiative of the Ministry of Science and Innovation, the Ministry of Economy and Digital Transformation, and the foundation that I work with, the Spanish Foundation for Science and Technology. The development began some years ago in 2016, and it's an ongoing effort. It's not something that's concluded. We're collaborating with the ministries, but with also with several universities and software and IT firms. Most of the modules that we developed in this infrastructure are open source, and therefore the idea can be integrated into a future, when it is created or when it's developed, EU research and development data hub. Our infrastructure is based on state-of-the-art text analytics to extract from large amounts of information, specifically science and technology innovation-related documents such as public grants, publications, patents, and other collections of research and innovation documents. So we work with structured and unstructured data and information, along with, like I said before, the experts and the policymakers. In particular, with respect to public grants, I'd like to say that we operate with these large sets of documents and data sets, not just the abstracts or the metadata, but also the monitoring reports that have been used by the researchers. And some of the insights that we get from these documents are, for example, the themes that the funding agencies have with respect to their portfolio of projects. That is, these themes are detected and we can detect if there's overlapping or complementaries among the funding instruments. We also have a bottom-up classification of the funding projects. That is, where if the projects have similarities or they're different, and this is can be used to complement predefined classifications that sometimes it's not easy to do with some of the new technologies and the new areas of research. with these technologies, the evolution of an agency portfolio of projects and how the funding priorities are determined and what the strengths are that are happening along the over time. Also, we can determine the implicit communities of funding organizations working on similar themes or the thematic profiles of the researchers that are working together. So basically, the way that these technologies work, it goes beyond the classical categories and classification methods to discover new themes. So apart from the Spanish grants that we've worked with the Corpus Viewer, we've also taken an analysis of our microdata with other sources of data, for example, with the European Commission data from Corpus, and we've compared our national strengths with the European strength to see what our advantages are, to compare what the priorities have been defined, how the Spanish research themes are developing with respect to Europe. And we've done a bunch of analysis with respect to our policies with respect to the European Commission. And right now we're taking the Corpus Viewer. We've just been granted a Horizon 2020 innovation action. We want to escalate this tool at a European level with other partners. We have a consortium of 13 partners in six countries that we're going to escalate this. So that's a little bit about the Corpus Viewer itself. It's a tool that we've been using to analyze the data in, like I said, research projects, patents, publications, and that type of information to determine themes. So how we used it for policy making, like I said, it's been a pilot experience, it's ongoing, and we use it for many different analysis and for different policy making. And more recently, we've done it for, I can talk about 2 cases. We did it for the to compare artificial intelligence research in Europe, Spain, and in the U.S. Because, as you know, we developed recently artificial intelligence research and development strategy in Spain, and artificial intelligence, as everybody knows, it's hard to understand because there's no predefined classifications. It's a technology, it's an application, and it's very transversal. So it's not like you can easily tick and find it. So we use it to identify the public grants, to identify the patents, to identify the research trends. We use the different text tools to identify the project, optimizing them. We worked with experts also. We compared it with the relative weight with respect to the portfolios of the different agencies, and we used this in comparison with Europe and Spain. So this is what we did with the artificial intelligence, and also we're working closely, like with Michael said, with the Fundestat project and the work that we did with our research grants and how it's going to escalate with the other OECD countries. Another example we're working with the Ministry of Health in Spain to analyze different diseases like diabetes and rheumatology and diseases that are not easily classified because it cannot be aligned with specific classifications. So again, to answer specific policy questions like Michael mentioned, it's very hard to do this when you don't have those classifications. So this type of tools, these type of analysis help the policymakers answer these type of questions when it's not that easily available. And it's a little bit more, how can I say it? It's faster in the sense that you don't have to wait for the statistics to come through. So just to be very brief, I don't want to take any more of your time, and I want to finalize my intervention by summarizing that the Corpus Viewer, it basically is a text analysis tool that can be interconnected and interoperable with national and European research and innovation systems. It improves coordination, we think. The Corpus Viewer is based on a voluntary and modular approach, and that's what I was saying. It has different modules that can be interconnected. And I would like to say that our experience has been a positive experience, and it shows that it's possible and important for governments to use the unexploited, or that could be more exploited, research and innovation microdata and information from the different agencies, the funded agencies, to design and implement coherent and hopefully more effective STI policies. There's a lot of lessons to learn. Thank you, Anna.
Thank you, Cecilia, very much. So decision-making process, sharing information about allocation of funding and interest of the applicants to the different thematic areas, collaboration across Europe, and artificial intelligence all together in the package. Very interesting. And I'm looking now to the results of the second question that we put on the poll, and I see that 87% of the participants believe that the scope to improve sharing data and use of data in Europe is very high. It's very high and high. So very impressive. Thomas, what do you think? Anything to add on what Cecilia said?
Absolutely, very interesting points, Cecilia. I found particularly interesting the notion you made about structured and unstructured data. There was also the question in the chat about big data, and I think this is probably one of the most crucial topics that we have to discuss right now, because it's strongly interlinked. Of course, we have the long experience in treating structured data, but we already have enough to do to bring our structured data in a shape to respond to new and upcoming policy questions like non-technological innovation, social innovation, responsibly resilient innovation, and so on. So it's also a method, artificial intelligence, that you can use to structure your structured data in a new way to respond to new policy questions. And the topical modeling that also Michael mentioned is one of the most important aspects in this sense. But at the same time, you have the big chunk of unstructured data to enrich our indicators from our structured data, patents, publications, projects, and so on. And I have the feeling there's still a lot more research to do to bring this in a shape that it is really to be used for policy consulting. It must be very closely considered with experts, as you have said before, to get out the very relevant information of this very big chunk of data, because you can also produce a lot of noise that you don't want to have in such policy analysis.
Thank you very much. So evidence-based policymaking, maybe that's the message that we should pass. Michael, would you like to add something?
Yeah, I mean, I guess we're never going to be in a situation, as Thomas was just saying now, where the policymaker can just press a button and they get the message, they get the answer. There's always going to be some sort of mediation, if you like, between this sort of data and having some sort of analysis done of the data, and then that analysis being put into sound bites that the politician or the senior policymaker is able to understand. But that's fine. I mean, that's the way with all sorts of analyses. One other comment. I mean, I noted you said near the start of your presentation that you're talking and working with other international groups at the moment. Perhaps you could say a quick word, maybe not now, but later on we could talk a little bit about how something like what you're doing could be scaled up at a European level. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Michael. And before we go to the third question addressed to Thomas, I'm just looking to the reply that we have to the third question in the poll. In your opinion, what would be the main benefit that sharing RNA data could bring? And actually, there are 4 possibilities to reply: more transparency, better informed national and regional RNA policies, improved coordination between EU and national and regional RNA policies, or all of the above. And the reply of the participants is 63%, they believe all of the above. So indeed, we can do many things with data for policymaking. And it is really an advantage to be able to share data and bring them together. This is exactly what it has been said already by our speakers. But then I would suggest that I go to Thomas. Michael just said that what it is done in Spain could be giving the idea of doing something at European level. Actually, that's a little bit the spirit of my question to you, Thomas. Have you been working on integrating publicly available RNA microdata from different member states? What are the main challenges that you have faced? And how can we build from this experience and widen the scope to integrate more data and maybe to do something at European scale?
Thank you very much for the very interesting question, Anna. So very multifaceted. So you can look from very different angles and perspectives on this question. For instance, in terms of value, you can look from the perspective of the research community. Today we have the focus on the value for the policy side or more policy-oriented community. In terms of challenges, we face severe technical challenges on the one hand, but also, of course, theoretical and conceptual challenges, integrating these different views going around in this R&I policy scene, I would say very broadly. I will try to give a rough idea about these different perspectives and angles in answering this question. But let me also before say a few words about the European background that you have mentioned before, and you have also mentioned two notions in your question or in the introduction before, the UPRO database and the RISIS research infrastructure that I would like to mention before I come to the question back shortly, because this is a good example where we can show how we try to integrate that at the European level. The UPRO database that we have developed at AIT since now more than 15 years is a project-based database that contains projects mainly from the European framework programs, but also from many other funders, and now also from national funders, on project-based R&D collaboration in Europe. And it has meanwhile become one of the main facilities for research on innovation networks, very broadly speaking. So to trace innovation networks across the European territory, but also across different technological domains or thematic and topical domains. And UPRO has been integrated in RISIS. RISIS is the first pan-European research infrastructure for science, innovation, policy studies. And with exactly the goal you have mentioned in your question. So the goal of RISIS is to integrate the so-called, Michael has spoken about the silos, these silos of R&I data in Europe, with the large R&I data producers like publications in Leiden, patents in Paris, and projects in AIT, and firm innovation data sets we have on startups, Cheetah. And to our view, this has really brought a completely new dimension of value added that we did not have before, because we really shifted the attention from developing our own data in a specific direction to the attention to integrate, to make these data sets interoperable, and by this trying to address completely new research and policy questions. So this focus on interoperability at the European level and at the level of microdata, so at the level of researching organizations or even individual researchers, is completely new. And this is something that we really try to establish with this infrastructure that is now set up since the last 6 years. We are now in the second round. And in the second round, this aspect of digitalization becomes more prominently against all these aspects that Cecilia and Michael has mentioned before, topical modeling, but also unstructured data, big data, and so on. So this is just about the background. Coming back to your question, first about the value, why we are doing, what's the value of what we are doing. And of course, from a research perspective, it's quite obvious that in research and innovation studies and policy studies, it was for a long time reflected by mainly theoretical and conceptual debates, and one survey here, one small data set there. So it's really paves the way for a new systematic empirical insight to advance these very important theoretical and conceptual debates in R&I policy. For instance, when we talk about impacts of EU-funded networks on innovation capabilities of firms, this is something that we can nowadays, in this integrated way within RISIS, address quite in a robust way with the infrastructure that we have built. You could not have done this before. So this is a very simple scientific value. So this value comes from making these data sets interoperable. Then, of course, the value for the policy, to my view, it's about studies. You can make contract research using these new data sets for policymakers. They can use it for policy design and so on. But what is new, and this is also very much related to the digitalization, with this integration that we have done in RESIS at the level of microdata, for instance, for patents, publications, and projects, we have created a new tool called RESIS NOMAC, where for the first time, you can check it out under nomac.eu, where for the first time you can, in an integrated way, for free, download indicators on innovation and research across Europe at a very detailed geographical level and at very detailed topical level, because we have taken a very similar approach that Michael has said before. We have annotated our data in relation to, in our case, key enabling technologies and societal challenges, and are now preparing to move into the direction of sustainable development goals. And of course, these are indicators now that can be directly used in the policy-making process and analysis. So to my view, this is really the most important value added for now that comes from this interoperability we have worked on. And really, there's a lot of computer science behind, because you need to geocode the data items at the micro level. You need to invest a lot in actor harmonization, so name standardization and so on. We have invented name matching algorithms so that we can harmonize, for instance, our database with the patent database at the organizational level. So for the first time, you can interlink how framework participants patent, how they publish at an organizational level over longer time periods, also to look at dynamics and transformations. So these are then also the challenges. So the challenges are, of course, technical challenges. It is new to us that we have invested a lot in making ourselves fit for digitalization. So we have hired simply much more computer scientists that we have had before, on the one hand, and on the other hand, we need to make our results clearer, as Cecilia also said, with experts to the policymaker, the so-called sense making out of these new products that we try to make. And these are challenges, and of course also the challenge is collaboration is always an opportunity, but also a challenge, of course, because you have to integrate these different views, conceptual views on the one hand, but also different technical choices that the different data sets around have. And I think it's one of the most important objectives, to my view, to put more emphasis on integrating these different activities that are still going around. And I'm not only speaking about data here, I'm also speaking about services like data annotation, data enrichment, topical modeling, and so on. And I think I have said it before that the notion of coming from databases to data infrastructures is one very important route to approach this kind of topic. That's my...
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Thomas. And I would like also to state here that we would like to thank you, but also the member states, for the collaboration that we have already established in the area of sharing data. And we are happy that we were able to provide you access to the data that we are collecting through Horizon 2020 program, in the future through Horizon Europe program, so that you could create these indicators at European level. I think this is actually the future and our vision also, to be able to share data with all the member states, in particular in the area of R&I funding, and to see the trends, to see the indicators, and to be able to have open conversation at the political stage, or where the research and innovation is heading at, and how we can collectively together in close cooperation with the member states direct our spending, our investments, our priorities. And this is actually an exercise that we have started to discuss in the context of the European research area. As you know, a new communication is going to put in place. We hope that we will be able to propose a roadmap of actions. We need to be monitored, we need to be follow-up. So sharing data in this respect is going to be a very powerful tool to be able to monitor the implementation of research and innovation policy across Europe. I'm looking to the fourth question that we posted in the poll, in asking of the opinion of the participants, what are the main obstacles that they may hinder the ability of European governments to share their research and innovation microdata? And what I see that has been replied there, it is 44% lack of coordination between European national and regional governance. And I think in the context of European research area, as I said, we will try to address this issue. But I see also even more, 49%, links to the legal constraints and the sensitivity of the data, which is, of course, another obstacle that we need to address through legislation. There is, of course, very strong legislation, but also through security legislation, we have to be able to address this issue. And I see also that only 7% they are talking about IT infrastructures or technical problems. Indeed, this is exactly the issue. It's not a matter of technical problem. You see, digital technologies help us, provide us the tools to share data. It's more a matter of coordination, legal certainty, and security. Having said that, I would like now to pass the floor to Michael, asking him whether he would like to complement to what Thomas said.
Yeah, I mean, Thomas, you raised rightly the central issue of interoperability. And there I'm wondering the extent to which you used established standards to obtain or to achieve the interoperability between the different systems. And if you were using established standards, what were the benefits? What were the limits? Did you have to create new standards in order to get that linkage and interoperability? And going back to what Anna just said, I mean, the interesting thing about standards is that they are, of course, a technical infrastructure, but they're very much a socio-technical infrastructure. In fact, they're socially constructed, they're accepted or they're rejected, or adopted, I should say, and or not used at all. So that's in a way they're a good way to look at the socio-technical nature of many of these systems. I'll stop there.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Shall I ask Cecilia maybe to intervene? And we are at 17:42. We have 15 minutes left, and we have some questions from the audience. So if you agree, I'll take Cecilia, and then I suggest that we look at the questions that we have received from the audience, and we'll try to reply to those. Please, Cecilia.
I just wanted to add another reflection about the whole issue of text analysis and interoperability, the issue of language, local language, because obviously it's not the same to analyze texts that are in Spanish, English, Greek, French, et cetera, et cetera. So that's different. That's another challenge also that we haven't discussed, but is also something that's there too. Not just the identifiers and the unique identifiers of the centers or of the researchers, but there's a language issue there too. So there's a lot of lessons learned. I mean, I think that there's a lot, the discussion is important, and I think we have to learn from each other. And this is, debates like today is important. Thank you, Anna.
Thank you very much. So I suggest that we read the first question that we receive from the audience, and I don't know who would like to reply to that. Can we fish into big federations to late best practices? The person who asked the question is about USA and Brazil, as with smaller examples, Germany, yet scalable. I don't know who would like to reply to this question. Maybe Thomas, do you think that there is a possibility to fish on big federations to learn more?
I think it's not only a possibility. I think it's our obligation to screen all these different activities and make some kind of best practice and try to integrate as much as possible, which is useful into our own approaches. I think that's very clear to me, and this is also related to what Michael has said about standards. If I may very shortly answer to this, we have tried to create standards in RESIS in 3 aspects. That is, and of course you have to make choices. That is geography, actors, and topics. So the data sets that are inside of RESIS are harmonized along these 3 main dimensions that we have said that are important for indicators production.
Thank you. Cecilia, would you like to add something on this? I mean, based on your experience as well.
Yes, I fully would agree with what Thomas had just said. The fact that we have to fish and tap into what is being done in other countries, I think, is very important. So yes, I mean, this is something we do. This is something we were doing actually with Spain. I mean, the fact that the NIH and NSF data is all available in the US, we were able to learn from them and you compare with our local data from Spain. So yes.
Michael, I have another question which goes a bit beyond our discussion, but maybe you would like to reply. Do you think that we are still far from being able to use big data to produce indicators for policymaking and monitoring?
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think we're far from doing it in a routine way. I mean, this is still an art form, I would say. I think we also need to be rather careful in some of the uses that we do see of big data. Sometimes the data appears to be there, and let's do some big data analysis. And what does that tell us? And maybe we're not starting sometimes with a question. Instead, we're just starting with the data that's there. I think there's also often there's a lot of small print around this data, which then isn't read, or it somehow gets lost when the message is transferred, is disseminated. So I think we need to be careful. That's not to say we shouldn't be using big data. I think this is very much the future. But I think here we're still very much in the early days, and we need to better understand the limits of this data, the limits of the assumptions and the machine learning algorithms that we're using as well to analyze this data, and just generally be a bit cautious.
Thank you, Michael. And since we have you on the floor, I would like to ask another question, which I think it would be good for you. It's about the role of the private sector. Would it be beneficial to link the various data sources focusing on research with the community innovation surveys, thus innovation data from the private sectors, in order to understand impacts beyond the public research sector?
Yeah, I mean, the thing with a lot of the private sector data, of course, is that there are various secrecy or privacy or competitiveness conditions around that. I see Cecilia wants to come in here as well, but we have to be careful with this data. So there are ways of pooling that sort of data. So in the OECD, for example, in the FundStat project, which I mentioned, we have a federated approach where we provide code and protocols to the data holders, who then implement those on our data sets, and they give the results back then. So we have internationally comparable data, or data at least that's comparable in some way. We cannot expect organizations to, like national statistics offices, for example, to provide the Commission or ourselves with that sort of data, because of the privacy and aspects around it.
Sorry, it took some time always to switch from mute to on. Cecilia, would you like to complement what Michael said?
Yes, I'd like to complement on both the issues, the indicators issue and the private sector. I think with respect to the indicators, I think we have to think about them, and we have to move towards using big data to how we're gonna develop these type of indicators, because it would be naive to say that we're only going to be maintaining indicators based on statistics or based on more classical methodologies. I think we have to complement that, and that's something that is being worked on at an international level within the context of the OECD itself in the NESTI group. So this is something that we have to think about, have to define, and have to structure and have to harmonize. So when we decided to measure R&D back in the 60s and defined the Frascati manual, I think now we have to think about how we're going to define some kind of future indicators using big data. So I think it's the way to move forward, but we don't have them yet. So caution, but it's the way forward. And with respect to private sector data, I wouldn't say the source is the statistics information from the statistic offices. I would say it's the funds that they receive from the public sector. There's a lot of funding innovation agencies that are funding the private sector, and that those projects are available. Are those the type of projects that we analyze too? It's not just the funds from the funding to the universities or to the research center. It's the funds of the public sector funded to the private sector. And that information, that metadata, that unstructured data, that unstructured information also gives very good insights of the private sector information, where you don't have to tap into the statistical offices. I think that's a different type of data. That's something that I don't think we should really touch. What we're talking about is what we fund as policymakers, what we're giving to the private sector. I think if we analyze that information, there's a lot of richness that can be seen and can be detected there. So I think the private sector information also is very useful. It can complement it. It's a type of organization, and they're receiving public funds. So this would be helpful.
Thank you very much. I switched to another question, which I find very interesting, and then Thomas probably will be able to reply. Many times people believe that building the appropriate RNI data system collection may be too costly. We have seen that the benefit can be high, but are they high enough to offset the costs? Should government invest in building, upgrading their RNI data collection systems?
Of course, I would answer yes now. That these infrastructures get still funded. But being serious, of course, the costs are high. And the costs are in particular high when you don't want to get them privatized again. I think that's the big issue we have when you invest a lot in standards that we all want, because I see also there's another question about standards. And you invest a lot in standardization and cleaning and interoperabilization. And then you want to make this data fully publicly available still for open access, for open science. Then we have the problem that it may be privatized again, because there's not enough incentive to invest in this kind of activities without getting any rents. And that's a classic argument in innovation policy and innovation economics, but I think it's very good here that there is needed investment. And I think investment is needed maybe in a more harmonized way to better integrate these different fragmented activities. And yes, I think the costs are worth, if you look at the policy goals of the Innovation Union and Horizon Europe and so on. I think we need that kind of support. And you see, it's not a one-time cost. That's a very important argument also. It's nice to make a data set for 1 year, but if you want to sustain it year by year, you need to update millions of data, you need to annotate, you need to geocode, you need to harmonize again with the others. So that's a year by year action. And of course, the machines become better and better, it becomes automated, but still you have running costs that are very significant.
Thank you very much. I think all the speakers can reply to this question, and actually how we can do this exercise in the most cost-efficient way. So maybe Michael would like to say a few words, and then Cecilia, I suggest.
Okay, yeah, I mean, the issue of sustainability of these infrastructures was just raised by Thomas, and it's a very important one. It's one that we kept running into when we were doing our research of these systems. So many of them were almost experiments. So they had some seed funding. They got going. They were sometimes quite costly, sometimes not. But then they got to a certain size, and they were beginning maybe to offer services, but then the question mark was, how much is it going to cost every year? How is it going to be funded? Because they hadn't yet quite got to above the threshold where they were offering regular services, that sense making that Thomas was talking about earlier on. They were under continual threat of being closed down. So I'm not sure how we can overcome that. Perhaps it's just one of the features of something that's emerging. There's going to be a lot of startups, if you like, and a lot of things will fall by the wayside as well. But I guess there needs to be, at some point, there needs to be some threshold whereby these things are seen as essential. In fact, that you're not able to do good policy making, you're not able to answer the questions that are important without these sorts of systems. And I think until we get to that stage, these things are going to still be a little bit fragile in terms of their existence.
Cecilia, please. We need your views as well on this.
Yeah, this is a difficult question, the issue of sustainability and cost. I mean, I think part of the reason that cost can be an issue is because there's the fear of substitution of people. And I think that in the end, the interface between the people, the policymakers and the experts and the machine is necessary. And that's always going to be there. And if we want evidence-based policymaking, if we want to be more efficient in our policymaking, if we want to further exploit unexploited information that we have, it's the only way forward. It's not a question of if we should do it, it's how we should do it and how and best way to move forward. It's a matter of being more efficient. So it's one of those questions that you say you have to go you have to go forward, you have to move, you have to go in that direction, and I think it's necessary, and I think the cost benefit is justified, because if we have more efficient policies, then we'll see that it will benefit in general in the research and innovation area in general. So I think it's a matter of just how to do it. Again, this is something that's not just an infrastructure. It's an infrastructure with the people behind it too. I think that's important. We cannot forget that part.
So I think, thank you very much. Thank you very much to everybody. I think we have still 3 minutes. And I would like to conclude this session by, first of all, thank all of you for being with us today, the speakers sharing their views, their ideas, their experiences, the participants asking all these interesting questions and replying to our polls. I would like to try to conclude with 3 words. First of all, we must collectively capitalize on the power of data and to develop the design better RNI policies in Europe. I think through the discussion today, it's clear that we have to do it. We have to find a way to do it in coordination across Europe with the national funders, with all the member states, with international organizations. We have to do it in particular now in the COVID crisis. It has been demonstrated that sharing data is extremely important. Second, we have to do it in a way that the efficiency and the impact that we have, it will be counterbalanced by a cost analysis that will meet the needs. So it's not going to be too costly, but the cost will be counterbalanced with the positive impact that we're going to have. And sharing microdata with RNI data between regions, member states, and European institutions is certainly not an easy task. And we cannot be naive on that. There are legal, technical, and political constraints, but we have the opportunity to work all together and to overcome them. We cannot let these difficulties to defeat us. So let's discuss maybe in a year's time or maybe even earlier on how we can continue our collaboration in this respect. And maybe in the next RNI days, we can present to all of you and even broader audience a project which is a European one, and which is based on the collaboration between the European Commission, member states, and the other international organization. And fourth, let's try to make the best use of the benefits of the data. I strongly believe, I have been working in the European Commission the last 23 years, and one of my first projects was to develop a data to share with all Europeans on transport mobility. So my dream, I believe it will become a reality through research and innovation data. I would like to thank all of you for your presence. I would like to thank Thomas, Cecilia, Michael for participating as speakers to this session. And thank you very much. See you, hope, soon. Bye-bye.
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 Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.